And we are again.
So thanks again so much for allowing me to pre-record here. I'm Emily Ma, and I'm actually a little bit more well known as E.M. Tippett. I have 15 novels out altogether, but 12 of them are contemporary romance. My 3 novels that are out as Emily Ma are paranormal romance, and what I'm actually going to read from is my work in progress, which kind of is parallel to that trilogy that I wrote, but it's going to kind of start its own series of interconnected standalones. Each of them is going to be paranormal romance as well. So this book that I'm through the working draft of, and I'm just tightening up, working title is After the Apocalypse. And so I think I'm just gonna dive right into it, because I'm hoping, if I wrote it right, it doesn't need a whole lot of setup. The certain elements are supposed to be mysterious. Chapter 1, Now. The house is neat and well maintained, bearing the hallmark of an owner who cares about the little things. This causes a pang in my chest. I lie in wait on the far side of the street, shapeshifted so that I camouflage. It's early evening, so there's still plenty of light. His is the only house on this block that is occupied. The place is simple and small, 2 stories, but probably no more than 2 bedrooms, if that. Clapboard siding, fresh painted, though clearly not new, a peaked roof of asphalt shingle, and frame windows with blinds drawn complete the picture. The dwelling appears to sleep, as if too bored by the view to rouse itself. Stubbly grass takes up the space between the chain link fence and the front porch. The stairs up to the front door are outlined with reflective tape so that no one trips or falls. This means he's expecting visitors, and I should be happy about that, but I'm jealous. I want to know who they are and if any of them are women. In my shapeshifted form, the scent of hot tar and gasoline from the road is pungent, overpowering. The rictus skeleton of steel girders is visible in the distance, all that remains of the skyscrapers that once defined downtown of this now mostly abandoned city. The air is clear and the sky is blue, but the sheer scale of the destruction along the horizon makes the scene oppressive nonetheless. A car whooshes past, and I flick my eyes fast enough to see that it's him, driving the same car he had 7 years ago, and it wasn't new then. A new scrape adorns its front fender, and there's a crack in the driver's side window that wasn't there before. Otherwise, it's held up well despite the whole apocalypse thing that happened. He pulls into the driveway, which is alongside his house. There is no garage. The car door swings open and he gets out, just him, alone. I hold my breath as he pauses to look over his shoulder, sensing me perhaps, but without understanding what I am or how I work, he won't see me. My heart aches and I wish I could shift and talk to him, but I'm not sure that's wise. Those pale gray eyes of his do only a cursory perusal before he starts hobbling towards his back door. His once slender and lanky body has been transformed. He's got sculpted biceps and broader shoulders. While it's not appropriate for me to contemplate, I nevertheless do wonder if he's got a six-pack. I bet he does. The back door is on the side of the house, so I can still see him as he approaches it, can still see his face even. His hair, once long and floppy in the front, is now cropped short and is coarse enough to stick up. There's a scar on his left cheek, little more than a faint line, but probably disfiguring in his opinion. On the side of his neck is a burn scar, and when he digs out his keys, I see that his left hand is also burned, the skin shiny and thickened, so that it pulls taut as he grips the keychain. I focus on his left ring finger. It's bare. He's wearing long jeans, so I can't see what causes his limp. Still, I've seen enough to get some idea of what he endures day to day. Michael Holzman is not a vain guy, but he is a self-conscious one, or he was when I knew him. He goes inside and I'm alone again, staring at the sleeping house. None of the blinds twitch or move or open. As the sun sets and the sky darkens, there's only a faint light in the kitchen window. Hours pass, no one else arrives at the house, and the light winks out while another one appears upstairs. By 11 o'clock, it too is extinguished, and the place could almost pass for abandoned, except that it's in better shape than its rickety neighbors. I'm not able to stay and watch him continuously for days, of course. I'm supernatural, not superhuman. I have to take breaks to walk, eat, drink, and check in with the rest of my kind, which is always disorienting. There are exactly 12 people in my kind, including me. Our abilities are incredibly rare. The ones I grew up with were a bunch of manipulative sociopaths, and I did not fit in with them at all. The ones around now are decent people, and I'm not sure what to do with that. I would like to fit in with them, but I'm not sure if I do. After everything I've done, I'm not sure I ever can. So I shelve the issue and watch Micah. I see enough to get a clear picture of his life. He works as a nurse at an urgent care clinic, and most nights he comes straight home from work. Sometimes he makes a detour to get pizza or Chinese food, and sometimes he goes to the homes of friends for dinner or to watch DVDs. His friends are all ages and, much to my dismay, all genders. Some nights at home he reads. I have to peer through a crack in the kitchen blinds to see this. Others he stares into space, sipping a soda and smiling as if going over fond memories. He's on the phone pretty regularly, chatting with people who make him laugh and who invite him places. One night, he even has a bunch of friends over and they eat pizza and play board games until 1 a.m. My feeling of being out in the cold solidifies with each passing day. Micah is the most resilient person I know. He always had the ability to create a cocoon of happiness and warmth wherever he is, no matter how hard life got. And it looks like he's even better at it now than he was in high school. This is a life he deserves. Me showing up again would disrupt it. But now that I've seen him, I don't want to leave. I want to find a way in. He is still technically my husband, even if he never wanted to be, and I want to talk to him. The least I can do is apologize. 7 years ago. I want to develop healthy human social bonds, my guardian Denise insisted. Now, she speaks with a French accent. I'm not going to try to do a French accent. So just that caveat there. Her French accent catching the principal off guard. People didn't expect that from a Black woman because apparently they know nothing about African history. Denise was from the Democratic Republic of Congo originally, and then had lived in Montreal for a while. I didn't want to be there in the principal's office, but I didn't dare even scowl about it. If there was one word that described Denise, it was effective. Whether it was making crepes, explaining obscure astrophysics concepts, or laying on a guilt trip, she could do it all with minimal effort and surgical precision. That day, she was pleading my case to the principal, who had again threatened to disenroll me from school. This, I should mention, was before the breaking of the world, when Los Angeles was intact and fully inhabited. Aline's missed over 70% of her classes, the principal pointed out, speaking with that weird condescension I often saw paler-skinned people adopt toward my Black guardian. Racism is endlessly fascinating to those of us without a race. My kind insisted I dye my hair black because that, coupled with my brown skin, made me look Latinx. Aline Mendoza was the name on my forged birth certificate. I didn't have the patience to dye my eyebrows or put on mascara, though, so my facial hair was still strawberry blonde. People probably wondered if I spent my extracurricular time stirring pots of dubious chemicals in an underground lab and bleached my facial hair a little every time I lifted the lid and peered inside. The only reason the school record said I'd missed 70% of my classes was because not all of the teachers were diligent about recording absences, or maybe some of them felt bad about dropping the hammer on me. I ditched 90% of my classes easily. I couldn't recall offhand the last time I bothered to go to school. She has a 4.2 GPA, said Denise. Have her join a gym to have social interactions, the principal replied. We can't have her absent so much. There are state requirements for attendance. If she won't meet them, then we have to report it to the authorities. Just homeschool her. Denise sat up straighter, her full lips pressed into a line. The office smelled like cheap carpet and despair. The latter was probably from all the other students who got marched in here by their parents. The door flew open and a guy with light gray eyes, cheekbones that could cut glass, and a tall, lithe frame topped by broad shoulders and a deep chest leaned in. His skin was ruddy, and at that moment, his cheeks were reddened. Oh, he said, sorry. His voice was so soft it was nearly inaudible. His smile was genuine, though, and in that moment, I learned what it means when a person lights up the room. Just wait outside, Micah, said the principal. He ducked out, shutting the door behind him. Right, said the principal, turning her attention back to us. I'll come to classes, I said. She turned and blinked at me as if surprised that I had the ability to talk. I sat up a little straighter. Denise says that if I don't come to classes, I can't learn to drive. This was true. She had said that. The fact that she couldn't dictate whether I learned to drive didn't bear mentioning. The principal frowned. Denise's confident facade slipped. She fidgeted and looked down at her hands, no doubt wondering if I was about to pull something. I'll come to classes, I repeated. I'll do the schoolwork. Please, give me one more chance. Asking for something felt strange and submissive. My kind rarely did this. Denise shifted her weight and looked away from me. The principal sighed and flung up her hands. Fine, you're enrolled. Show me that you can keep your attendance above the state mandated minimum, and we don't have to have this conversation again. I noted she didn't tell me what the state mandated minimum was. That was for me to go look up if I was serious about attending school. Denise nodded, her demeanor still uneasy. Meanwhile, I was eager to leave. I hoped that Micah was still in the lobby so I could get another look at him. Chapter 2. Denise dropped a stack of papers on the table beside me that evening. I was working on homework in our kitchen, which was a cozy space crammed full. Copper pots and jello molds covered one wall. Cooking utensils hung from a rack over the butcher block counter. The round table had been shoved into one corner so that there was only room for me and Denise to sit. I often suspected that she filled her house so as to make it feel cramped. The other 11 members of my kind rarely lingered here long, though if any of them had shown up at that moment, the tantalizing smell of steak probably would make them linger. Stalker, I said, expressing my hypocrisy even as I picked up the papers to look through them. I had snuck a quick peek at Micah as we left the principal's office. It was so brief that I'd barely registered anything beyond the fact that he was sitting in a chair, staring down at his lap, and his left arm was in a sling. Even that brief glance made my heart flutter, though. He was so cheerful, so content. And Denise had noticed me looking because, of course, she had. She was also the kind of person who could find things on the internet in 1 hour that a private detective might take a week to discover. His name is Michael Holzman, Wampitu, she says, lifting the lid on the mashed potatoes before setting it down again with a clank. What else did you learn? I asked. The pages she'd handed me were of court pleadings, not what I'd expected. His parents are divorced, he's living with his mother, and he has a restraining order against his father, whom he alleges broke his arm. Wait a minute, I said. What? You can find this on the internet? Only if you know how. The child abuse details are not on the internet, but his mother was arrested for drug possession and dealing, and these allegations were listed in her pleadings. Denise folded her arms and smiled, smug. So he's like abused, I said. That did not fit with the cheerful guy I'd seen. I couldn't help but wonder if he was on drugs. Well, I don't know, said Denise. His mother's pleading detailed that she never abused him, and it listed evidence that he'd never had an unexplained injury before. Besides all that, he's a national merit finalist. She flipped the steak with a hiss and crackle and turned to look at me. Did you get his address? Yes. Okay, so it's fine if you do this, but I'm not allowed to stalk people. I don't have powers, said Denise. You're like a super genius. That's a power. You know what I mean. Humans know that people like me exist. That makes it more fair. Humans kind of know. They do not, she snapped. Search even the most obscure urban fantasy. They have no idea that your kind exists. Because there were only 12 of us, I thought. Fantasy books have the elements. No, they don't. She flipped the steak again. Your kind does not need to work very hard to hide because you are such a deviation from normal human evolution that no one would know to look for you. Love you too, I say. Sorry. Fix that. Said. You know you're my favorite specimen of deviant evolution. Another flip and more hiss and crackle. You say that to all your foster children. She smiled at me then, in that way that she always did. That way that made me feel like we shared a secret, and that secret was that I was her favorite. I didn't care if it was true or not. I liked how she made me feel that it was true. Finish your homework, she said. Dinner is in 5 minutes. If my kind back then had seen her talk to me this way, they might have killed her on the spot. But I sensed then and fully understand now that this was another way she told me that she loved me. The guardians who raised my kind were always kept on a short leash. Child rearing was considered a task beneath beings of our abilities. So my kind would kidnap or otherwise extort mundane women, meaning women with no supernatural powers, to perform the task. Denise's responsibility was to keep me safe and fed. She was not, however, to infringe on my freedom in any way. My kind believed themselves godlike, and mundanes did not tell gods how to behave. If I'd ever told anyone that she disciplined me, she would have been exiled or dead. And yet, from when I was an infant, she'd set boundaries. She put the cookie jar in the one place in the house I couldn't access it and took me to playgroups where I was required to treat other children as equals. I attended birthday parties, for which I was required to buy presents that I had to give away. My world did not revolve around me, and yet, even as a child, I never tattled on her. When any of my kind visited, I saw the fear in Denise's eyes and would put on spectacular tantrums in which I would order her around as if I were accustomed to being a tyrant. When they left, I would apologize, and she would give me a cookie. Treating me this way as far back as I can remember was how she told me she trusted me. She put her life in my hands. Telling me no was how she told me that my actions mattered, and I needed to think about consequences. It was how she told me that I mattered, and that she wanted me to become a person she would want in her life even after I'd flown the nest. That night, as she put my plate of steak and mashed potatoes down in front of me, she gave my hair a quick stroke. I miss her so, so much. Now, standing in the street outside Micah's house, I remember Denise's no stalking rule. I hesitate to go to his door, not because I fear, but because I hope, and that only amplifies my fear. He's never filed for an annulment or divorce. In this post-apocalyptic world, it is very easy to cancel a marriage. Hundreds of thousands of people have had to do it, either because their spouses were presumed dead or had been so far away when the world broke that there wasn't a realistic expectation they'd ever return. This doesn't sound like the kind of thing he'd overlook, but what if he did? The very idea that Micah would hold out hope for my return is ridiculous on its face. And yet, here I am after 7 years, newly back on Earth, and staring wistfully at his house. I've been here for over an hour, ever since he arrived home and went inside talking to someone on his phone. Enough of this, I think. I glance at my phone to be sure that it isn't too late. It's 9:10, so my behavior isn't outrageous. I've faced down armies of fallen angels and demons tearing through the realm boundaries to take over Earth. I've gone against every older member of my kind, beings with more power than the rest of the supernatural world put together, and prevailed. Still, walking up these steps to Micah's house takes all of my courage. As I lift my hand and ring his doorbell, I feel like I've got a 100-pound weight strapped to my wrist. I hear the floorboards inside creak and see the tiny light in the peephole wink out as he places his eye to it. Don't panic, I tell myself, but I've bit my lips so hard I can taste blood. He probably won't even open the door. But that thought makes my eyes sting with tears. I don't want to have to come all this way to be rebuffed now. The deadbolt slides with a scrape and a click, and the door opens inward, letting out the scents of mica and floor varnish. Micah's a dark silhouette. The only light is a lamp in the far end of his living room. I can nevertheless see his expression clear enough, a mix of terror and surprise. Ouch. I had worried he might not recognize me. I haven't dyed my hair in years. Aline, he says. Well, he definitely knows who I am. Hi, I say. He waits, which I'm used to with him. He feels no impulse to fill silence. He doesn't feel the tension that creates. I note that he's wearing a ball chain around his neck, but refuse to get my hopes up. I still wear my wedding ring on a similar chain around my neck. Right now I can feel it against my skin as if it burns. Sorry to just drop in, I say. I don't mean to impose, and I'm not hiding from anyone this time. His eyebrow flinches, as if he finds this ironic. The polite thing to do is to offer to leave and never come back. The problem is that if he said okay, I would have to leave and never come back. After everything I've done to get here, I can't do that. Nor can I lie to Micah. I've never lied to him, and I'm not going to start now. There are plenty of legitimate reasons he has to hate me. I don't want to give him more. So, I say into the ever more awkward silence, I know it's been a while, but I'll tell you anything you want to know. He swallows hard. What do you think I want to know? It's been 7 years. Why bother to come here now? It's a long story. And this is the first chance you've had to find me? Yes. His eyes widen and his posture remains guarded. He opens his mouth, shuts it, then looks away. Micah, I literally just got back to the US, and I will totally tell you where I was and why, but only if you want to hear it. Fine, let's hear it. He folds his arms. Like I said, it's a long story. So you want me to let you in so you can tell it? It'll take a while to tell. He heaves a sigh. Fine, come in. So I'll leave it there. And then I don't know if there's anything else you wanted me to add from the intro or anything like that, anything that I glossed over.